In this House of Logic video, we're going to have a look at Cloud-Init and what you would need to do to get yourself set up with this and how to customize the images that you're going to download using it. So part of this process is involving actually following along with the Cloud-Init support documentation. I make no secret of this, that most of the commands are going to be coming from here, but there's some additional steps and a little bit of adaptation that I've applied to the process. Before you go down this route, what I would recommend you do, if you're going to customize any images, is that you set up snippets first, because it will make the whole process a little bit easier. So I'll share the link to the Cloud-Init support within the video description. First things though, go to Data Center within Proxmox, and you want to go to Add, and you're going to add a directory, and this is where you're going to set up some snippets which can be used for text and other small bits of information that you're passing into different places. So it's not intended for any machine storage, VM storage, or container storage, whichever you like. So we're going to call this one, so we called it snip, and we're going to call the directory /snip, and it's just going to sit on the local machine. We'll choose snippets. We'll take off disk image because we just want to keep the snippets in there, and we're going to go add. Now you'd want this on shared storage if you're working in an actual cluster with multiple hosts. I'm not for this particular instance, so I'm not going to worry about it. So the snip directory is set up, and if we now go and have a look on the root, so if I do ls / there we can see snip. So if we do ls snip, within snip you see snippets, and within snippets at the moment there's nothing. So when we come to using a snippet later on, this is where we want to be placing it. So the next step of what we're going to do is a lot of this is actually going to be following through the documentation. Is we're going to use the shell command for doing the majority of this. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and this will be the main focus for what we're doing throughout this video. So first of all, we would be downloading the actual Bionic server cloud image as mentioned in the documentation. So that command looks like this. If I just paste that in, we're not going to bother with that because we've actually already downloaded it. So if I go to, if I just do a local CD image, and we can see that I've got that there already. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to go and create a new virtual machine, and we've mostly been using the user interface up to this point, but we will go through and use the command line. It is a little bit easier to follow through the documentation and do this. So this sets up a machine which is going to be running on VMware 0. Obviously, if you've got different options and you've got different requirements, you want to be adapting these commands. So there's VM 9000, which has just appeared. So if we go and have a look at that, you can see it's got a fairly straightforward single processor default setup. And underneath options, which we'll come back to in a few minutes, the Chemu guest agent is not enabled. That's something that's not mentioned in the documentation. So with that set up as an initial blank machine, what you then want to do is you want to go and specify the actual import of the image that you have downloaded, which we've not bothered to video record because it's like watching paint dry, watching things download. So we're going to go and set the actual image to be from /root /img, and then we've got a Bionic. Oh, there we are. It has managed to autocomplete. If we set that going, then that should now go and basically write that image onto the disk image that we've created, the blank disk. So we'll just wait for that to run through, and it shouldn't take too long. Okay, so that's finished. Now what you want to do, as it says in the documentation, is you want to actually set the actual IDE drive to be using the Cloud-Init option. So if we go and have a look at the options here still, we can see that underneath hardware, we I don't know if we even do we even have an IDE drive? A CD-ROM drive, and we don't. So the IDE2 is something that we need to specify, and you can go and fiddle around and create a drive manually. I wouldn't recommend this. It's just a bit more consistent, a bit easier to do this way. So if we set our local LVM Cloud-Init volume as such. There we go. We can see that we've got that on there now. And then we're going to change the boot order to make it only boot from SCSI 0. Now, this Cloud-Init drive is actually used to inject some of the information as part of the boot and installation process. So it's important to do this. Now, the next bit, let's set the SCSI option here. So we're going to change the boot order. Again, you can do this through the UI, but in this instance, as we're doing everything else through command line, it's just as easy to do it. So if you look at the boot options now, where are they? They're under options. So our boot order is simply SCSI 0. Now I'll go back to the hardware. Main option now left to set is actually a little bit more interesting. So what you will have in terms of your virtual console is this option then sets it up to actually use a serial port, which I found slightly surprising when going through this process. As being as old as the hills, I've actually played around with serial ports on PCs a very long time ago. So we set that, and the fallback there is to go to VGA, as I understand it from the instructions. So that's actually gone and added a good old-fashioned serial port on there, which is what's going to be used for our main display, as you'll see shortly. Now, the next option as part of the recommended options and the documentation is to then turn this VM into a template that can be used. I'm going to do that, but then there's another option I'm going to set, because I don't think it's entirely good the way that this is emitted. So we're going to set this now to be a template, which means we can then clone it. So there we go, and that should then be visually represented in here shortly, I would expect. There we are. So you can, unlike some template options in some hypervisors, actually go and change some of the options. Now, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key options that's actually missing is the Kemu guest agent. So if you set this here now, when any settings change, or sorry, when you clone it, and the settings will not change when you go after your cloned VM that you generate from this template. So it's a good idea to set that here, and there's some other options that we're going to set shortly, which will also help to enable you to bootstrap your machines as quickly as possible. Now, where's the mouse pointer gone? There we are. Let's get back to the console window. Okay, so what you need to do at this point is you're going to want to have a look at what the actual options are on the template itself for Cloud-Init. Now, this should come back with a pretty vanilla set of information. So if we just dump that out, now there's three different pieces to this, as I understand it. You have a user, you have the network, and you have the metadata. What I'm going to demonstrate is going to apply to the user. If you have specific network or metadata settings, then you can apply these in the same way, but we're just going to do the user one today. Excuse me. So we can see there we've got the host name. It's going to be told to manage the host file. It's going to set the fully qualified domain name to the same as the host name, and it's going to upgrade the packages by default. That's all fine, no objections to any of that, but what we're going to do now is we're going to now, rather than dumping that to command line, to the standard out, I should say, we will now do the same, but we're going to dump it to file. So it's going to go to custom.yml, which is also known as YAML file, known as yet another markup language, and we're going to now do an edit of that custom file. Now, it should contain exactly the same information that we've just dumped out. It would do if I could put in the correct file name. There we go. So we see the host name. We're going to change that. We're going to call it, let's go with Ubuntu custom. And our fully qualified domain name, we'll stick that as the same. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add in some extra options. Now, these are also available out on the web as additional documentation for Cloud-Init, and I believe they are consistent across the different packages and operating systems that you can use. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to reboot if for the packages if it needs to. We're also going to specify some packages, and we're going to specify some additional commands. So if I paste that in now, what you can see that we're going to do, there's the package reboot. There are the packages. So we're going to install Apache 2, cow.say, because I like small cows saying things in ASCII. And we've got the run commands for setup and run commands for the Camu guest agent. And finally, we're just going to echo a job done testing command through to a test file. And that's it. So we're now going to save that using nano, Control O, and then Control X to exit. And we need to put that somewhere where it is going to be readable by the VM. So it needs to go into the Snippets directory. So we're going to do this. We're going to paste in that command there, which I prepared in advance. So we're going to move custom.yaml to snip/snippets. And if we now do a ls on snip/snippets, we should be able to see it there, which we do. Great. So the final step to prepare this then becomes to actually tell the template which option to use for the settings here, which we're going to go with. We're going to paste it in. It's to actually say set VM, or rather template 9000 Cloud-Init custom. The user option is based on snippets custom.yaml. So we hit enter on that, and that has been applied. Now the other Cloud-Init option, I should go and change quickly. I forgot to mention this one. We will just go and set that setting. I forgot to do this one, and so I would recommend you go with DHCP if you're if you want to be able to access the machine at all, because otherwise it won't come up with the network. And additionally, we will change that to give it a user, and we'll give it a simple password so that we know what it's going to be. I think I mistyped that. Okay, so now what should happen is when we go and deploy a clone from this machine, we should be able to get it booting up, and it should go through the process of installing those packages and creating that, setting up the Camu agent, and we should see then the test file. So we're going to clone it now. Now we're going to use a linked clone, which is what's generally recommended with Cloud-Init, because it will create effectively a delta disk file in relation to the originating template. Of course, it does need to be stored on the same storage as the originating template for it to make sense. But you may want to go with a full clone under some circumstances if you're then going to do other things with it, or you want it to operate independently. So for the time being, we're just going to call this one. What should we go with? Ubuntu Custom 1, and we're going to hit clone, and so off we go. And that will clone the machine, which we can see going on here. Okay, so the cloning, of course, is very quick because it's a linked clone, so it doesn't have to copy the entire disk. Now what we'll do is we're going to start it, and then I'm going to press the console button on this, and we'll let the installation run through. Now I'll probably skip ahead as part of this because it will take a couple of minutes at the very least. I seem to have a slight problem here, so it's reporting here that the snippets, I think I may have, yeah, I know what I've done. I've got the wrong setting in there. So let's go back in. I've got the path slightly wrong. So we'll go back to our custom option. I think it is actually, that. Okay, let's try that again. And as you can see, if you don't get the snippets correct, it will not work. But the thing about this, so we've got to now remove it and then do it again. Okay, so let's clone again, and again let's call it custom 2. So I spent quite a bit of time yesterday going through this process when I was testing out the additional commands. There we go. So that's there. Let's see if we can start it this time. It's going to tell us very quickly if it can't start. Yeah, that's wrong. Unable to parse directory. I will, yeah, snip/custom. Okay, let me go and find out what I've called that storage. So the directory is called snip. Let's change that then. So again, we'll just go and kill that one off. It's just for tidiness sake. We could just leave it there. If we go back in here, I think actually that's what we need, because it is of the type of snippets, and then the actual snippet name. Let's give that a go. And if it's not that, what I'll do is I'll stop the video, figure out what it is, and then demonstrate the command here. And then I'll stop people having to sit through the detailed complexities of all the troubleshooting. But let's do that. And we'll go back to there, and we'll clone yet again. Custom 3. Again, link clone. There we are. It's got its name. Let's try that. No, still no good. Okay, right, I will pause the video and investigate and find out what I've done wrong. Okay, so I figured out, sorry, excuse me, exactly what I've done wrong here. So it turns out the path was actually correct, but my file name was wrong. So when I've been going through and troubleshooting this, I've actually been able to set the Cloud-Init custom file or custom information on the template I've been actually already cloned. So what I needed to do, if you note carefully, is that there's actually YAML, which stands for yet another markup language. Often it's spelled out as YAML, and often it's spelled out as YML. And I went and stuck an extra letter in the file name, so entirely my fault. So we've applied that setting to VM ID 113, and now I'm going to apply it to the template as well. So we can see that that one's starting up. I'm not going to actually let that one continue. I'm going to stop it. I'm going to go and destroy it, and in fact I won't bother destroying it. I'm just going to clone again. So we'll let that one stop, and we're going to clone yet again, and we'll go with Ubuntu Custom 4, and we can see that this process works. Okay, so that is now ready to go. We should be able to start that. Hopefully that will start without any problems, and it has started. Okay, and we're going to now open the console on it. Now, slightly differently from many of the other consoles, you can actually see it says it's starting the serial terminal as well. So we'll give that a couple of seconds, and we should start seeing some output on there. There we go. So that is going to run through, and we will see that process run all the way through to completion. And it should say when it's done, and then we can go and quickly check that it's got what we're expecting to be installed, and that everything is working as expected. So I'll just let that run through. Okay, so we have finished the installation. It's not been a total success because some of the actual scripts, it's not totally light, but we can now log in. So you can see it's got the Ubuntu custom name, which is as supplied in the config file, and we will feed in the username and password details that I plumbed in to the UI, and hopefully this will work. Let me just try that again. Clearly I'm having a bit of a fat finger moment. Let's just find out what the default password is on that one. Maybe it hasn't actually taken it because I made that change after making the adjustment with the config file. Okay, so it may well and has actually used Ubuntu and default. Let's see if that works. No, oh dear. Well, it looks like we might be back to customizing again. that's not what I was expecting at all. Yeah, I'll have to quickly find out what our best option is on this one. Okay, so I've had no joy with the custom password and username. So what I'm going to do, just to complete this process and show that it can be done. I also now understand why this has failed, because I believe it's actually come up with a different username, and it may be Cloud-Init derived or Ubuntu derived, but for whatever reason, I'm not able to log in. So I'm going to kill this VM off, first of all, and what I will do, let's get rid of that. Let's remove it. So we'll get rid of this one and get rid of the other one quickly first. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go and do a slight repeat of the earlier process. So we're going to go back in to command line via the shell. Excuse me. And we're going to dump out the actual user again. So let's go all the way back in. So if we go back to there we go. So we go back to the settings here. We have a username and password. So I'm just going to edit that and make sure it is exactly what I believe it to be. Okay, and with that set, we'll go back to the shell, and we're going to go and dump that. We're going to call it custom2. Okay, so what we can now do is we can do a less on custom2. Okay, so that now has, if you know, a username and password set of values in there. Now what we can do, using the magic of copy and paste, if we copy that, which it never quite likes in with Control-C, no, we'll do that like that. Sorry, in less, I should say. Now we're going to do a edit directly on the actual custom config that we're using. So we're going to go to /snip /snippets and then custom.yml. Excuse me. And this being a YAML file, what we should be able to do is, I don't think it matters exactly where we put this, but there we are, users default. Now I think we need to go under here and right click and paste. There we are. Now actually I'm going to just quickly save that. YAML can be quite pernickety about the formatting, would be a kind way of putting it. So yeah, it's simply user and password. There's no users are there is a user's default specified in there as well. So let's go and edit that as well to put that back in. And it is as important as getting the white space correct on here, or we will see yet another error as part of this process. So hopefully we don't have to update the template, just the custom config, because the custom config is already associated with the template and it is usable in a live capacity. So let's try this again. I forget how many Ubuntus we'd gone through. I think we were on 3. Let's go with 4. I've forgotten. Cloning is done. Let's try and start. Okay, it's managed to start. We will now see what the outcome of this is. So once again, we will let this run through, and I will cut ahead to when it has done, and we will see what it says. Okay, so actually now we can see we've got to the end of the process. It says started execute cloud user /final scripts and reached target Cloud-Init target. So note that it's successful here, whereas our last attempt was not. So now if I try and log in, If I can type correctly, hooray, we are in. So this is looking good. Now, one of the things we did was to create a custom command that just simply said job done. So if I do an ls and then do less of testing, it says job done. Great stuff. IP address, which should be a DHCP address, and is indeed 192.168.5.178. And other thing to test would be the Qemu guest agent as well. Well, as Apache as well, actually. So system CTL. I can never remember which way around it is. It's Apache 2. There we are. That's running. So that's been installed. And the Qemu agent, easiest to see, back in the user interface. So if we go and find the machine, we can see, there we go, we've got the IP address. So I think after a little bit of troubleshooting, that is it in terms of the process. As you can see, you do need to go through and test it and make sure that you have the correct snippet storage with the correct file names when you go and assign those onto the template or directly to the cloned VM image that you're going to use for Cloud-Init. Either way, yeah, do be prepared to persist and try again, as you can see, because yeah, what you shouldn't do, which is what we did, was to go and once you've actually applied that custom config, to go and change the options, because they will not automatically ripple through. So you will need to go and dump the information out again from here and then reapply that. So yeah, that about sums it up for this one. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you found this useful, and we'll catch you next time. Bye now.